So we left off the last screencast talking about attributes, or starting to talk about attributes. And basically, attributes are basically a similar way that we had the head up here and things about your document. Attributes are ways that you can talk a little bit and give a little more information about each individual tag. And some of the different types of attributes that you could be using this semester if you choose to is class. So you could say it's a class. My attribute is part of a class, and you can give it a name, and then you can use that class for formatting with something called CSS, which you'll be learning about in W3 schools, but which I won't. We're not going to really be tested too much on that this semester, but it's a fun value add to make your code look really neat and do some really fun things with colors and fonts and things like that inside the attribute. So the class can be used. You have an ID tag, which is going to be very important this semester. It gives your tag a name. So in this case, we'll call it my div. And we don't need it. You won't be doing too much with that this week, but the ID is going to become, and it gives it a unique ID. That div has a name. I can reference it. I can look it up. I can do different things and do things to that div because it has an ID. You can do a style. Style, as I mentioned, CSS. Style, you can embed some of those same things inside of a style, so you can change colors, different things like that with styles if you want to look them up. And then another one is called title attribute. Probably won't be using that one too much. So there's that. I'm going to show you real quick the fact that how you can kind of do embedded tags, so you can have various levels of tags and how you can do that. So we've got these paragraph tags, and let's go ahead and do the second. This is a second sentence here. Now you can use tags inside of tags. So you can have and some of those tags I can show you how they're used is, for example, similar in Word, you have um, a bold and italic type tag. So I've got text here on the screen, and let's say I want to make that first sentence bold. I can use the bold tag, and then I come over here and close it, and that makes that first sentence bold inside this paragraph. So I've got this tag, and inside this tag I've got this tag, and I can come over and do this one and say I want to do the rest of it, I want it in italics, and then close that off. So now this sentence is in italics, this sentence is bold, and both of those sentences are inside this paragraph tag. So you can have tags inside other tags. You can nest them inside of other tags. The one thing I want to talk about that's really important is you want to make sure the order of these tags, keep that straight, because that can cause you problems. Since you want this stuff in, all these inside, if you come and you add this outside of your paragraph tag, notice it still looks okay over here, right? But it really can cause confusion and potential problems with your code if you're not careful about this sort of thing. You want to make sure that the stuff that's inside is always inside. And so right now here you've got this paragraph that starts out here and ends here, and you've got an italics that starts inside of it, but you didn't close it till it was outside of it. And in the olden days, this could have actually broke your code really bad. Most of your modern browsers are smart enough to say, well, I know what he meant. But it can cause you problems, and if you have a lot of these, then the code can really get confused, and even a modern browser might, have not hard time figuring out what you're trying to do. And so it's just good practice to make sure that that you are nesting all of this stuff appropriately. And if you've got something inside, the opening and closing should be inside. And if you got things outside, it'd be fine. For example, say you wanted to bold the entire paragraph, you'd be okay putting the bold stuff like this, right? That would make everything bold, and you're keeping your nesting appropriate because you started the bold tag outside of the paragraph and then you ended it outside of the paragraph. So that's just a little tip about nesting and using multiple tags in. Now, you may have to come back and watch this after you've played with the HTML again. I would recommend coming back and watching these again after you've played with the HTML. it would come in handy, especially next week, possibly as we get into the JavaScript and are trying to figure out how to make our JavaScript and our HTML interact, because this semester we are learning two different types of languages, HTML and JavaScript, and how to make those two languages talk to each other. So the last thing I wanted to show you, which isn't going to be too important for this week, but we will be using this a lot this semester, is something called the input tag. And input tag, you'll notice that if I do this, it basically puts a box over here that I can type into. I can put input. Now you can kind of notice here that we've talked about, last week we talked a little bit about our defining tables where we had the input, the processing, and the output. So what we're learning here is kind of the ground rules for the input and the output. So you'll notice here this can be the input, so this is how we can collect things like, for example, we needed to get the acreage of the lawns we were going to mow in the last week's example. You can collect that in here, and we'll work more on that next week. And then, you know, your output, all these things that you're learning about JavaScript, this div is going to be important for output. So we're learning this week kind of the structure you need to know to be able to do the input and the output of our algorithms. And so that's where the JavaScript, or the, excuse me, the HTML is really important. To talk a little bit more about the input type, the input field, you can have multiple types. So we can give it an attribute called type, and we can specify different types of input. For example, if we need a checkbox in our code, we can create a checkbox. Now with the input fields, input tags, if you put text in the middle of in the inside of these tags, it's used more or less as a label. So my label, we'll just call it that for now, and you notice it'll show up over here as right next to your element. So you can do a checkbox. You can even do a file. We won't get into this semester, but you know, if you need to get writing code to upload, so you notice here, bring it over here, that when you click the browse, it pops up an upload screen to upload a file. So that's one type. You've got a password if you want to collect information, but you don't want it to be visible to the person standing over my shoulder. You can put a password type input box, and you get real text back there, but it only shows dots. And then the last one is a radio button, right? If you do two of these, you know, you can do the types of things. Now this isn't going to work necessarily because, but basically the radios allow you to have 4 choices and only allow them to pick one, but you have to integrate those into the element of a form element, which you'll read about a little bit in this week's reading, but you're not really going to use it too much. The form itself, we can do most of this semester without having to do too much with forms. You can do everything this semester with forms as well, so it's kind of going to be up to you how you want to do those things. So that's kind of it, the basic background for HTML. I hope that this gives you a primer for what you're going to be studying on your own this week and help make the W3 School stuff more understandable, as well as your own code. It might be beneficial over the next couple weeks to come back and re-reference these screencasts as we move forward, and kind of you'll probably get more out of it watching it again as we progress through the semester a little bit, and it might help clear things up. So, all right, I look forward to seeing your code, and have a great week.